G'day guys, I'm here at the Digital Workplace Conference in Sydney and I have a PowerShell guru. His name is Vlad Catrinescu. How are you going, Vlad?
Pretty good, how about you?
Awesome. So I've got lots of questions to ask you, but I want to start, how did you become a PowerShell guru?
So I'm an IT pro at heart, so I've been doing installs and so on since kind of SharePoint came out. So if you really want to get it to the next level, like PowerShell is now not a choice. If you're a Microsoft admin, if you have to administer anything Microsoft, you have to learn PowerShell. Either if you're on-prem or in SharePoint Online, you still have to learn it because like we talked a bit in the session a bit earlier, it's like Microsoft gives you a bunch of options in the user interface, but all the advanced stuff is in PowerShell. So you don't have a choice to learn it.
You don't. So your sessions have been on PowerShell for Office 365.
Yes.
Does that make you, once you know that stuff, are you now an expert at PowerShell for SharePoint, PowerShell for Exchange, PowerShell for Teams? How transferable is this stuff?
So you have the base of PowerShell, which is how you do PowerShell in general, because every Microsoft kind of server software has its own module. So after you know the base, then you have to learn what is specific for each one of them. I'm mostly a SharePoint guy, so I know my PowerShell for SharePoint Online. I can do everything inside it. If you ask me to do something in Exchange, I'm not an Exchange administrator. So I know the idea, I know how PowerShell works, but I'm still gonna have to go on TechNet, look up, okay, a mailbox, that's the name, those are the properties. So if you know PowerShell, you're able to figure out the rest, but it doesn't make you automatically a master of how to administer all of the different softwares. But it gives you the tool to be able to go out there and understand how that works, and you're still going to be able to create the scripts.
And with your knowledge of PowerShell for SharePoint, does that transfer almost 100% to PowerShell for Office 365 SharePoint?
Yes and no. I mean, for SharePoint between on-prem and online, most of it is the same. Like if you go for SharePoint on-prem, it's new SP site. If you go to SharePoint Online, it's new SPO site. So it's only a one-letter difference. It's really easy.
Why is there a difference?
Well, one is new SharePoint, SP is for SharePoint, SPO is SharePoint Online.
Oh, great.
That allows people that, like say you're in a hybrid SharePoint environment, you want to run cmdlets from the same PowerShell window to both on-prem and online. If you'd have the same cmdlet, it could create conflicts. But now since it's two different cmdlets, when you do new SPO, it knows that it has to do stuff for online.
Okay. So before we get to PowerShell, I can do all this manually. I could go into Office 365, into the Admin Center, and do all this manually. And I think the equivalent can do the same thing in SharePoint.
On-prem.
Yes, SharePoint, what's the?
Server.
Yes.
Server 2013, 2016.
Yes, the
Central Admin.
Central Admin.
Yes.
So I can do the same thing in those things. And I assume you use that. When do you stop using that and always jump out to PowerShell?
So not everything that you can do in PowerShell, you can do it in the user interface as well. In this session today, I showed a few examples. For example, creating an Office 365 group that has the hidden membership group enabled, so people don't see the members. Right now, you cannot view Office 365 group site collections in the SharePoint Online Admin Center. So I try to use, if I only have to go to a site collection, just create something new and easy, I'll just do it through the Admin Center because I'm probably already logged in. But if I have to do anything that's not available in the Admin Center, or I have to change a setting on 2 or 3 more site collections, then I go to PowerShell. So it's not that if you know PowerShell, you're going to do 100% of the things in it. But sometimes it just makes more sense to go to PowerShell.
And is there, like, when we deal with SQL Server, we script everything. But is there times that you definitely don't, like I understand the repetitive nature, if you want to do something 100 times, of course you'd use PowerShell. But is there ever times where it's just as easy to do it in the UI, but you'll always go to PowerShell for keeping records or other reasons?
Well, I mean, if it's stuff that I know that I'll have to do, maybe as a consultant, if it's stuff that I know I'll probably have to do at another client or stuff that I do often, I just have the PowerShell script in a notepad file somewhere, change the URL, and just apply it all. And there's a bunch of scripts, especially for on-prem, that even if I can't do them through the UI, I just have the scripts, I have a few variables at the top, and just run the script, even if it would be as easy from the central admin, because it's stuff that I do often, I just keep it keep it, change a few variables, and exit.
Okay, got it. So I just heard you say Notepad.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you use VS Code to do this with, so you get IntelliSense and all the goodness?
That's a good question. I use VS Code sometimes. Usually, most of the time, I use Notepad++. As crazy as that sounds, Notepad++, I know that I have it on all my systems. It's easy that whenever I go to a client, none of them are going to have a problem with me installing Notepad++ on their servers. VS Code, they don't always like it to have Visual Studio stuff installed. But I mean, VS Code is the new kind of replacement for
it's
the
only 20
ISC.
megs. It's tiny.
Yeah, no.
It's just as painless as
it's not as
Notepad++.
painless as no.
It isn't?
No, because every time you open VS Code, there's a new update. It's like they push an update every other day.
Yes.
And
What, Notepad++ doesn't push updates?
not every day like VS Code.
They push a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, I like the VS Code. I like the IntelliSense. It's a lot better than the ISC, which was really a heavy client, took forever to load. But it's just that Notepad++ is such lightweight, and it gives me everything I need. But I'm not saying VS Code is a bad thing. And I know people that do it in the ISC, people that do it in Notepad, and people that do it in code. There's no right way to do it. Everybody does wherever they're comfortable doing it.
Right, okay. Oh, I'm comfortable when I have IntelliSense.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right. Now, I'm sold. I want to do PowerShell.
Yeah.
Tell me the basics I need to know. Like, tell me what Cmdlets are. How many Cmdlets do I have to learn? Tell me all the lingo. Lingo means all the important language.
Yeah, I know what it means, mate. So, first thing you have to learn is to learn the basics of the language. You're going to have to learn how PowerShell works in general, without even talking about SharePoint specific or system specific. Learn how PowerShell works, how you have how to open PowerShell, how to create a commandlet, how to create a script, and so on. And then after you learn the basics, like how to do stuff on the local machine, then you need to learn all the system-specific stuff. So after you learn PowerShell in general, how do I apply PowerShell to SharePoint Online? How do I apply PowerShell to SQL, to Exchange, to Skype for Business, and so on? So it's not something that can easily be explained, kind of, because if you look only at Exchange Online, it has 700 commandlets.
Yes, I knew it was huge, but can you just tell us what a commandlet is?
So commandlet is something that you do in PowerShell. For example, a new SP site, when you create a new site collection, that is a commandlet. So any line kind of that you do in a PowerShell script, that is what a commandlet is.
Okay, all right, cool. And what are other, what are the basic things that you always do? Do you always use commandlets to create a user? Do you use it to add licensing? Use it to create a site collection, to create a site? Is that what you use commandlets for all the time?
Yes, those are all great examples. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're a company that has a hybrid environment. You have an Active Directory on-prem, you sync users to Azure AD Online. When a user is synced, they're not always licensed by default. So what I do is I have scheduled tasks that run every day that look all of my users. Do I have any users that are kind of new and not licensed? I assign them a license. So that could be one of the things where you want to, instead of doing stuff manually, you have them running on a scheduled task, or it's something that applies to multiple users at once. Creating site collections, changing the sharing mode. Can they share externally? Can they not share externally? And so on.
Okay. So with so many commands, and I'm not sure, how many commandlets are there for Office 365?
For all of 365, we're talking about maybe 4,000.
Oh, but what about the basic set? What's the out-of-the-box set?
So no, that's the out-of-the-box.
Wow.
Only Exchange Online has 750 or something.
Right. I thought you could get going just with a core set that they give you.
No, they give you all. PowerShell is not. It's really for a more advanced user. So if you're a basic user, so you're new to computers, you're not going to use PowerShell if you're an end user. It's really for people that administer Office 365, people that have to make sure it works, and people who like level 3 people, not level 1 support.
Right.
So it's not something that's necessarily easy for everybody.
And when I want help and I'm struggling to find the right commandlets, what are the core ways of getting help?
Sure. So of course you can always go to TechNet, go to Google and search for stuff. But if you want to stay in PowerShell, if you don't want to go to Google, there are 3 commandlets that can help you. One of them is the get command commandlet. And this will basically allow you to get all the information from PowerShell, all the commandlets that I have. And you can also filter. So you can say get command that includes the word site, because I know I want to create a site collection, but I'm not sure what the exact commandlet is. And it will show you all the commandlets that have the word site inside. Then once you know the commandlet that you want to use, you can use the get help. When you use get help on the commandlet, it will basically show you examples, show you a description, and show you more information on how to use that commandlet. And the last one is get member. Get member will say, okay, if I do a get SPO site, what are all the exact parameters that I will get? What are all the functions that I can do with that commandlet?
And do you find that you use those commands before going to Google, or do you go to Google? Like what do you typically do when you're looking for something?
So most of the time is I already kind of know the commandlet that I want to use, but I just don't know all the parameters, so I stay directly in PowerShell and I do get member.
Right.
But if you don't know the commandlet like at all, you're completely new, you can just Google like, hey, how do I create a new site in PowerShell for SharePoint Online? And that's kind of going to bring you to the right thing if you have no idea of the commandlet.
Right.
But if I have an idea, I usually stay in PowerShell because I'm already there. So
when I have a massive, like I have a command, but I want to run it against a massive set of data, how do you feed these commandlets with, say, a CSV list, or what do you do in real life?
Sure, so you usually have an input of some sort. An input can be a text file, a CSV file, even a SharePoint list if you want to.
Oh, that'd be nice.
You use PowerShell to basically look at that input list and create stuff. So usually the most commons I use are either text files or CSV files, because
and where do they get generated from?
So usually the business, because I'm an IT pro, right? So let's say I have new users that come in every other day, and usually you still know it like 2-3 weeks in advance. So I have a sample Excel file that I send to my HR people. Every Friday they send me the Excel file filled out, and I create a template for them. So first name, last name, and so on. From Excel, I save it as a CSV file, and then I use it in my PowerShell scripts. So the idea is mostly you want other people to do the input file for you. That would be the best, or you can maybe get it from a PowerShell, but from another system if you need to.
I got to talk to you about Microsoft Flow, so that it automatically happens automatically.
Yeah, but there's stuff like you cannot create a user from Flow.
No, I mean you could get them to enter a a SharePoint list or a Power Forms. What are they called?
Power Apps.
Power Apps. So they enter in that, and then it comes through in Flow, and then it creates it automatically. It's already provisioning it.
Yeah, but you cannot, for example, creating a user or assigning a license, you cannot do it to Flow. The only way to do it through Flow is that you need to have an Azure Web Service, use Flow to call that Azure Web Service, which will have a PowerShell inside an Azure function. So it's not easy to do it through Flow. I know what you want to get to, but you can't. Sorry.
Trying to eliminate you.
Yeah.
All right. When you have a lot of code, and I assume that you'd have a lot of the repetitive code in different files, how do you modularize that?
So you can create functions. Like when you create code, you can create PowerShell functions. You can have a function file, and you can call the same function file from multiple scripts. Like you know that you have a function to create a new user with the parameters that you want. You can always call that function, or to create a site, or to create, if you have more advanced stuff, like sending an email. You can use PowerShell to, like say, created a new user, and you send an email after to that user with some information about the company. You can have all functions and call them from your scripts.
And at the top of the file, you reference the other file, do you?
Yeah, you refer it as a file inclusion.
It's an include?
Yeah.
Ah, beautiful. All right, sweet. Csum, I want to ask you about when you kind of hit the limits of PowerShell and you want a more script C# style approach.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what Csum is?
Sure. So one of the advantages of PowerShell is it runs on the .NET platform. So there's always the product group of each team, and Microsoft will give you a number of commandlets. Like when we look at the session for SharePoint Online, we only have 42. However, in some cases, we want to do more.
Sorry, what was 42?
The number of commandlets that we have in SharePoint Online.
Ah, right. Okay.
So if we want to do more than that, one of the choices we have is to use Csum. Because PowerShell runs on .NET, we can use the client-side object model. And that's what Csum stands for, to basically run kind of .NET code on the SharePoint server that runs client-side. So with 365, we cannot have server-side code. Everything must be client-side. But we can use Csum if you're a developer, if you know how to dev. You can write Csum code into PowerShell, so you can kind of embed that in your automation scripts.
Okay. Now, with regards to testing, is there any way that you can write this and then test it? Or do you ever write unit tests like developers do?
I mean, you test it, usually have a test tenant, or you have, let's say, if you want to do stuff with SharePoint Online, you probably do it in a test site collection. If you want to change it, like if you want to change stuff in the whole tenant, maybe you have a QA tenant or a trial tenant that you're going to play and break before actually running it on production. But yeah, there's no real unit testing because it's not a program that you kind of put there and then you can unit test and throw ideas at it. It's a script that runs once, right? So you really have to run it once, try it on test tenants, test site collections before running into production.
Do you ever want to verify that the script ran, and do you use PowerShell for reporting? So you run it against what you've just changed and then you look through the data?
Yeah, you can do that as well. You can look at the data, output it to like Excel or CSV to verify that everything got changed.
Oh. Do you ever use Power BI for reporting? Do you ever kind of look at all your data so you can kind of see, oh, we got all these site collections, but this one looks weird? Or do you ever have any nice reporting on all your settings in Power BI?
You could, but the thing is, Power BI doesn't necessarily plug into the admin part of 365. I know now you have the Power BI Content Adoption Pack that will give you a lot of that information. But if not, you can always, for example, get PowerShell to get the information that you want from an admin side, put it into a SharePoint list, and then plug Power BI on that list with the information. Because you could do it with Power BI, but still, it really depends on what you want to do. It could be a good idea.
Okay.
And there you can actually manage Power BI through PowerShell.
Can I ask about Teams? Is very popular, and we have
Sure.
Office 365 groups. What stuff can we do with that?
With PowerShell, nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. That answers the question.
Wow.
There's a public API so far, so you could probably, if you want, you could code stuff in PowerShell to see some stuff like that, but there's no PowerShell Cmdlets for Teams. So, yeah.
Okay. What about Azure automation?
Yeah.
Does that fill any gaps?
Well, for example, like say you have developers who want to create VMs and then burn them down. You can use Azure, you mean Azure automation, like the actual service in Azure?
Yes, and so you could fill gaps between Flow and Power Apps. And
well, the thing is, what that fills, like Azure Functions, the gap that fills is you can use a flow to call an Azure Functions that will run a PowerShell script. One of the examples where you would like to enable, where you want to do stuff with Flow, but it's like something that doesn't exist in Flow yet, you can use Flow to call Azure automation services or Azure Functions that will do stuff that's coded in there. Okay. So that's a gap that you could fill.
Okay. With Exchange, I assume all this works quite nicely there. Do you have any cool tips in that space with using PowerShell?
So, one of the cool things about Exchange is that the PowerShell commandlets between on-prem and online are the same. They use the same exact commandlets. So a lot of the scripts that people did for on-prem will still work for SharePoint Online.
Right.
And you can also use the Exchange module to manage Office 365 groups as well. So you can automate a lot of that stuff. You don't want to enable people to create groups themselves. You could have a SharePoint list where people would create an Office 365 group. You would use PowerShell to connect to that input list, and then use the Exchange PowerShell module to actually create the group and send them emails that, hey, your group is created, it's done.
All right. My problem is when we send an email to the company-wide, idiots always reply back to the entire company.
That's a great one. So, like you said, a lot of companies have the all company group, and sometimes people send it, and other people say, "Oh, reply all. I'll be there at the event," or "Here's my picture from the weekend."
I wish I could stop that.
So you can actually, there's a commandlet in Exchange that you can say, okay, this distribution list, only those people are allowed to write to it, are allowed to send to it. So if Joe does a reply all, he's going to get you cannot send to this distribution list. You're not on the allowed list. So
that kind of solves the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. I got to ask you a security question, or Troy Hunt would get upset with me. Do you store your passwords in the files, or do you store the passwords somewhere else? Or what are your best practices on that?
So there's a way by using PowerShell to convert to and convert from secure string commandlets to encrypt your password on the current computer. So you can get the password converted from a secure string to an encrypted string. Then it will be saved in a text file on your current computer. and it will be encrypted by your username and on this machine. So only you logged on that machine can actually decrypt it. If you take that file on another machine, you're not going to be able to decrypt it. If somebody else logs on your machine and tries to decrypt it, they're not going to be able to. So yeah, you can do it, but don't put them in plain text. Okay. That's the thing. Never put them in plain text, or Troy Hunt will get really mad at you.
That's right. Yes.
The password will show up on his site.
Oh, yes, right. He'll blog you. All right. So last question. Do you check your files into source control?
Dax, should I or do I?
You should.
Yeah, should I? Yes. So you can put PowerShell files into source control and all that. And I try to do it whenever I work on client projects and all that. I try to do it as much as possible. But a lot of time they're source controlled in my Dropbox with versioning. Right. But I mean, you should. It's a good practice if you work inside of a company to save them inside source control, have all the versioning done there and everything.
Okay.
But all right. Do I do it? I try to do it. I try real hard, but yeah.
You sound guilty. But anyway.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yes. It's been awesome talking to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Adam Cogan signing off at the Digital Workplace Conference in Sydney. Thank you.